everybody, that was Hounds of Tindalos by Eternity's End. And now joining us from Eternity's End, as I figure out why this name tag is not showing up on the screen, even though I can see it over here, Christian Müenzner from Eternity's End, guitarist. Sir, how are you doing today? Welcome to Pulse of the Maggots.
Hello, yeah, I'm doing well, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So we were just like sitting around bopping and banging to that song. We were talking about in the green room. This is not a surprise for anybody out there, but like I'm a huge fan of speed metal, traditional heavy metal, and like just new wave of British heavy metal and all of its offshoots, as is Cori. So I'm curious on like taking back to the inception of the band, because you are a very, very busy man with a lot of different credits to your name, solo, and then all kinds of other different bands. So when Eternity's End debuted in about 2016, I'm curious why you wanted to start this band and why you decided, with all of the different chops and musical styles that you're into, why to pursue this sound.
Yeah, well, basically, this is a type of band I always wanted to make since like my teenage years, basically, since the mid or late 90s. Because I mean, my background has always been more in classic heavy metal, and then from there I went to the guitar virtuoso stuff, and then the speed metal, progressive power metal, that type of thing. And of course, I mean, I'm mainly known for playing death metal, right? Through
Mm-hmm.
Necrophages and Obscura and those bands. I mean, I love that style, but I got into that style by accident because I always wanted to make a power metal band, but it was always difficult, mostly to find a good singer for that style, especially back in the 90s. And I was living in a very rural area. And then I joined a band called Defeated Sanity, which is a very brutal band. They're still going. And from there, I went to Necrophagist, and Necrophagist got relatively successful. And then I was kind of stuck in death metal for many years. And I always thought I'd really like one day to make the band that was my initial vision and idea that I had in my teenage years. So it was like uh, a long life dream basically of mine, and this is why I started that band back in 2014, and then our debut album in 2016.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. I'm curious. So what was that every one of us, and we have sparks throughout our lives, right? Which, like, when we first get into heavy metal, and then like as we progress and go through that, what was that initial spark for you?
You mean like when I got into music for the first time?
Yeah, and then like music, and then what? Because you said that you always want to be in a power metal, classical heavy metal band type of thing. Like, what about that draws? What about that music draws it to you? And what was that moment where you're like, "Holy shit, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I love this stuff."
Yeah, well, when I started playing guitar, that was like in around '93. That was actually before I was familiar with the term power metal. I got into it through bands like AC/DC, and then I saw Iron Maiden in concert with my father, and that was like, yeah, I want to play guitar, and this is kind of what I want to do with my life. So very early on, I was very serious about it. And then back in 1994, my guitar teacher, my first guitar teacher, gave me a copy of Yngwie Malmsteen's Fire and Ice album,
Mm.
and I guess you can call Yngwie kind of like proto Euro power metal in a way. And I was completely fascinated by that because in my family, there's always been classical music has always been played. My parents both play piano. My uncle has his own orchestra, plays violin professionally, and classical music was always held in a very high esteem. And I was always kind of considered the punk with my heavy metal music taste. And suddenly I saw like these two worlds combined when I heard Ingwe for the first time, right? And that was like, yeah, I kind of want to do something that combines the attitude, but also this kind of more educated approach to music, but without losing its edge. And that was basically the initial moment when I was like, yeah, I want to do that, and preferably something in that style along those lines. And of course, later on, I got into extreme metal and things like that. But that was always my dream. And what I like about it, apart from like the melody, that even people who are not musicians can get into it, but there's enough virtuosity going on that it still has this really over the top element. And I also like the lyrical element of that style of music, because it had this escapist kind of thing that takes you into another world far from your daily reality,
Mm.
and like into a alternate dimension, into like a world free of worry somehow, right? And that's always the feeling that I had, like watching a fantasy movie or reading a novel that really draws you in. And that was the subgenre in metal to me that was transporting that the most, basically. And I still think so to this day.
Agreed. Cori, I want to let you jump in.
Yeah, definitely. And so you just touched on it just kind of a little bit. So when you're writing your music, it's obviously very, very technical, still very catchy, but there's it's very, very educated. We'll just put it that way. So when you're writing your music, do you write it from a perspective of other musicians enjoying it? Because I can see this being something that other musicians would definitely delve into rather than just straight up fans of heavy metal.
Yeah, actually, I think it happens accidentally that it draws a lot of musicians to the stuff that we're doing, but I always try to put myself into the perspective of someone who's just a metal fan and not necessarily only a musician. So the biggest compliment for me would be if people who are not musicians could get into it just as much. So I have a lot of like metal friends from the area where I live, and none of them are musicians. And I always think I want to write songs that every metal fan can enjoy. So the technicality is not the focal point, even though, of course, it's very technical, especially in the solo sections and so on. But I don't really want to make a band that only plays guitar clinics and only attracts musicians. So I really want to have like these big, huge anthemic choruses that just the average metal fan can enjoy, like in a concert, in a festival. And I want to try to keep the songs also accessible. So even I think it's easier to make a song where there's a lot going on and overloading it with technique, but not having it catchy at all. This is much easier than writing something that's very compact, and despite the technical and progressive elements, have it accessible and catchy. I think this is the highest art, trying to do that, and that's my goal I have with this music. I mean, if I'm successful with it or not, I mean that's up to everyone's own perception, but at least that's my main intention.
Yeah, and you strike such a balance with your music that, I mean, it is very enjoyable to the average person. Like I'm not a musician myself, but
Mhm.
I mean, you saw in the green room, I am very into this music.
Yeah,
But at the
yeah.
same time, I recognize how educated and formal it is and technical it is, but you do find that balance very, very well between the two.
Yeah, I think in I was recently talking about it with a student of mine who's actually a very educated jazz guitar player, and he said, there is something in music that you cannot express academically. So there is something, especially in metal, you have a certain attitude, which I think is very, very important. And a lot of bands, when they get very technical or very progressive, they kind of lose that attitude, and it just sounds like a couple of music students writing a doctor thesis. And I think there is a certain thing that you cannot explain in terms of notes and music theory, but something that is felt. And this can be complex, this can be more simple, but a certain attitude needs to be there, in my opinion, to transport that kind of energy that heavy metal is supposed to transport. And
It's
I
like
try to kind of put myself, into the perspective of the listener. Can I feel that or not? And when I can feel it, then I think, okay, I'm going to use that song. And if I can't feel anything when I listen to it, then I'm probably not going to use it.
it's like finding the balance between passion and like prescription.
Yeah, exactly.
It can't be totally prescribed.
Yeah, I think the way I think about like the like music theory and technique and all of those things. I think these are just tools. It's like a toolbox that you can use to make whatever you want to express to help you to get to that goal, right? I think, for example, when people play fast on the guitar or they play technical stuff, the reason that people are doing this is because they want to create intensity in their music, which is an emotion. And when you want to create intensity, you need a certain speed or technicality in a way. That's one way to build up intensity. I mean, there's other ways too. But I think all of these things should just be a tool, but they should be secondary. They should not be the focal point. It shouldn't be like, oh, I want to write this song so I can show people I know how to write key modulations or I can play sweep arpeggios or something, right? That shouldn't be the focal point in the music. It's rather the other way around, that these things should be used to enhance the final product and to bring the vision to life.
Yeah, and that's a great segue because you were talking about all of these things, all these different tools that you use to create the music that you've done. So transitioning to the album, Embers of War, which is coming out this Friday. So this is your third album, so you've had some time to kind of like sit with this band and some of the players in it, although I know the lineups have kind of like, fluctuated here and there. A lot of people from the past album are on this one as well. I'm curious, obviously it was a different time for all of us the past couple of years. But as you're finding and exploring that voice with Eternity's End, I'm curious how the writing and recording process may have been different than any of the other ones, or how it was the same. Like, how are you kind of finding this evolution of your sound and of Eternity's End?
Yeah, well, I think in terms of the recording process, it wasn't so different than from our first two albums, because the first two albums we mostly were like a project. I think now we are a real band, but in the first two albums we like people lived on different continents all over the world, and we all did the stuff that everyone was recording his individual parts in their home studios, right? And then the album was mixed somewhere else. But so usually what happened, this was for the first two albums and for the new one as well, I would make demos of the songs with like programmed drums to send to the other guys, and then they would record their parts. So Hannes then would record his drums to the demos, and then on the drums I would record the final guitars and so on. And this is the same. I basically did the same this time. A lot of the album was actually written when the pandemic had already started. So there was a couple of songs that were written before, like in late 2019. And then when the pandemic hit and the lockdown started, I'm working from home anyway, so it wasn't so different for me. But then there were no concerts on the horizon, nothing, and I had like a really free mind to really focus on the writing process. And I really don't know what happened, but for some reason for this album, it really was like the ideas were just in the air, and I just had to grab them. I don't know why that was, because I remember other times in my life when I was desperately trying to write something and I just couldn't get up, with anything. I couldn't come up with anything that even that I tried to force. And this time it was just like, man, I could have gone forever writing songs. There was a time between that was before the pandemic, but in between Christmas and New Year in 2019, I wrote like 4 songs within a week or something. Like I was just at home putting on Godzilla movies and just collecting riffs and singing like chorus melodies on my phone, and I just could have gone forever. And I was like, okay, gotta get back to normal life now. But I really don't know what that was and why that was. I mean, this because it's not always like that. I've experienced the complete opposite, and for some reason that's what happened. And I think one of the things is that with Eternity's End now, we're now finding more of our own niche. Like it's becoming its own thing. Where on the first album you could still tell, well, there's a big like Malmsteen Symphony X kind of worship going on with a little bit more thrashy riffs, a little bit more faster and more technical songs. But then on the second album, it kind of evolved that we added these kind of speed metal elements from American and German speed metal bands mostly. And on the new album, I think the metamorphosis is complete now. That we're basically like a speed metal, heavy metal band with neoclassical elements than the other way around. And I think that's kind of what makes us sound quite unique. But in terms of the workflow, it wasn't that different from before.
Amazing. So we heard it here first, everybody. Godzilla was a massive influence on this new album, as Godzilla should be.
It should be, right? Yeah.
I'm sorry, Cori, did you want to jump in and say something?
Oh, no. I was just agreeing that at every point, Godzilla should be an influence somewhere on
Absolutely.
an album.
Yeah, I agree.
So within that, you are a busy man, especially like your writing credits already from this year have been all over the place, and you released a solo album last year and everything like that. For the people who are bad at time management and can't finish any projects, what advice would you have to them as far as like figuring out time management and going through all these projects and being so busy yet so prolific with your musical career?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's not as easy as it looks from the outside, because I'm right now at a point where I struggle to keep everything together with all the bands going on in a recording schedule, promoting an album, preparing for a tour with another band. So it's teaching. On the other side, I have my and I have my online shop and everything. But what I do every night, basically before I go to sleep, I write a list of things that I want to get done the next day, and they're ordered in terms of priority. Most of the time, I don't manage to finish all of them. Most of the time, the list is way too long. Most of the time, some tasks, let's say record something like a rhythm guitar part for a song or something, you run into a problem. It takes longer than you anticipated, right? Then other things on the list that you were trying to do that day, you don't get to do them, and they get taken over to the next day. But at least you're kind of organizing in your head, all the things that need to be done, and then you can order them in terms of relevance and priority. And I don't know, with music, with writing, and with finishing an album, I know that many people start doing things and then they don't finish them, right? It's very easy to get discouraged. It's very easy to run into self-doubts. So many things can happen, but I think it's something you just have to do it, just have to do it and work on it every day. Like get up and work on it every day. And for me, it's like sometimes when I'm successful with it, I'm really in a type of zone where I work myself to complete exhaustion until I go to sleep, and then I wake up in the next morning, and then I'm already excited to get back to it and work on it. And usually, of course, I plan things long time in advance. And now what happened this time was, of course, the pandemic hit. Then I rejoined Obscura, my old band, and we were doing a new album. I already had planned doing the Journey's End album, and then my other bands, Paradox and Alcohol, were like, "Oh, there's a pandemic, let's make a new album," right? So everybody was making a new album at the same time. But then I was structuring things in terms of like where are the deadlines when I have to deliver the stuff, and then it's just really like a daily job that you're doing. I mean, my work days have been pretty long, pretty intense. So they have been like between 10 and 14 hours every day, and also on the weekends. But I would advise it's always necessary to put a couple of days rest to re-energize, because otherwise your work will suffer at one point. But I think making lists about what you have to do and what has the biggest priority, what are the most closest deadlines that you have to meet, I think that's the most important thing.
I think that's incredible and sound advice. So thank you for that. Yeah, amazing stuff, Christian. The last question that I have before Cori jumps in with her last question, or possibly last question. I don't know. I don't read your mind, Cori. Unfortunately.
You don't want to. You don't want to.
I'm sure. Yes, that goes the same way over here as well. So yeah, Christian, when we were in the green room listening to this song, and as we've been like delving into Eternity's End for the last couple of weeks, getting ready to prepare for this, this is, as you mentioned that this type of music just captured your imagination, which is exactly what it did for me. Right, the very first time I heard Iron Maiden's "Number of the Beast," I was like, "Yep, that's what's going. That's what's happening. That I want to, ride a horse into battle with a flaming sword,"
exactly.
And just like that. That feeling that you get. So without spoiling the album, what is one of the things that you're most excited for people to hear from this volume of work that you are about to release on Friday?
Well, there's one song on the album that I'm really proud of, which has not been released as a single yet, and that's the second song, Bane of the Black Sword. And it's about one of my favorite fantasy characters, which is Elric of Melnibone from the Michael Moorcock series, with the sword Stormbringer. A couple of metal bands have used this theme before. I mean, the Deep Purple song Stormbringer was about Elric and the sword. And I'm just really happy about, like, I think this song captures most perfectly so far of the stuff I've done so far, what I want to achieve with this music. I think it's the most epic, or one of the most epic songs we did so far. I kind of like the lyrical content. I like the melodies. It has lots of key changes, a lot of virtuoso guitar parts, but it has I think this one has a certain energy that I'm usually trying to go for, and I think this is one of the songs where I achieved this best so far out of everything that I've done so far. So I'm really excited for people to hear that song, and I'm kind of glad it wasn't released as a single yet, because there's still like in my opinion at least, a big highlight to come for people who only heard the 3 songs. So I'm really proud of that. That one in particular, even though I really like the whole album. I mean, this time we kept the album a little bit shorter than the other ones. So in total, I had written 11 songs, and nothing wrong with the other songs, but it was just like, sometimes, you don't have to put everything that you come up with into an album just to put everything out there. Sometimes it's better to have something that seems very coherent, and not, because especially with the technical stuff, you can easily knock the listener over the head with it, and it just gets too much. And I think like this 45, 46-minute length, I think retrospective, it was a good choice to do that, even though we recorded like 3 songs more. And then there's another song we haven't recorded but written. And so I think the album as a whole works best so far out of the 3 that we did. So I'm also proud of that.
Yeah, and Cori and I talk about it a lot, where I think that self-editing is one of the hardest things for bands to get right, because it's just so easy to be like, yep, here's a 12-song, 57-minute album that could have easily been like 40 or something like that. And I have to...
when you're young, it's like you want to put everything out there that it's like...
Yeah, and I just have to say, my friend, Bane of the Black Sword is just an amazing heavy metal title for a song. Just fucking fantastic, dude.
Thank you.
And it shows incredible restraint to save the one that's probably at least one of your favorites on the album to the end, to when it's released. That's that's it. Because if it were me, I'd be like, just throw everything out there. because I'd want everybody to hear it, but I have no patience.
Yeah, that was also this time. I mean, currently there's also a problem that a lot of the labels, they all put vinyl out again, which is awesome.
Mhm.
But because of the pandemic, all the vinyl companies who produce the stuff, they have too many orders, and everything is being delayed. Nowadays, you deliver an album to the label, and then now it takes like, for some labels it takes like 9 months or something now until the album comes out. And this one took now like 5 months or something, which is doable. But it's like you finish an album, you're excited about it, right? You want people to hear it right away. You're like, oh, I can't wait to share this with the world. And then you're like, man, I have to wait 5 months, and they seem very long, And then by the time the album comes out, it's already old to you. It's like, okay, I've heard this so many times now. There's nothing new for me, right? I mean, of course, for people it's different, but I remember in the past it was a little bit different, right? You would deliver an album, and maybe like 3 months later or something it would be released, and now it takes a long time until the album is out.
Yeah, on that point, there have been a couple of bands that we've talked to that have been sitting on their albums for 2 years at this point. So like I did a full listen through with a band called Silent Planet a couple of weeks ago, and they turned their album in like late 2019 or something like that. And so we were listening to it, and they're like, yeah, we love this album, but like we're literally halfway through writing the next one, and like that's where we're at,
Exactly. Like your mindset is already completely different, right? After 2 years, you finish an album, and then you want to move forward from there, right? You don't. 2 years after, it's like it's already old, it's already old stuff, and you want to already be somewhere else then. Yeah.
So Cori, that's all I've got. If you want to do,
okay.
If you want to do the thing,
the super awesome question, the important question.
Super awesome question.
Yes. What is your favorite dinosaur?
My favorite dinosaur. I hope I'm not making a fool of myself now by giving it the wrong name. It's like when I was a child, I had a book about dinosaurs, and there was for me as a child, I always liked either like the biggest animals or the fastest cars. Everything had to be like the most awesome, right? And it was what's the name of that one with the really really long neck? And it was huge, but it only ate plants. Brontosaurus, is it possible?
Yeah, Brontosaurus.
Yeah, that's the one. Yep. That's the one. I really like that one. That's my favorite.
I think you're only the second person to say that. We don't get that one very often. We usually get like T-Rex, Velociraptor. We don't get a lot of the herbivores.
Yeah, I kind of like that one.
Yeah, we got two today.
And it was really huge and really big, but I don't think it was a danger to anyone, right? He was just doing his thing.
No, it just wanted to eat its leaves off the trees.
Exactly. And I find it very sympathetic, so I always like that one.
And also kicks off Jurassic Park in amazing fashion. You know what I mean?
That it does.
Yeah. There was a guy I went to school with, and then in 1994, when Jurassic Park came out, the original movie, he went to the cinema, I think, like 13 times to see that movie. And that was the time when I already got into guitar. And the interesting thing is that this guy now made a career out of that, right? And he found like bones of old dinosaurs within Germany and was all over TV. So I find it quite interesting that back in that age already, when you find a passion, it kind of determines what you do later on in life, right? So I think that's pretty cool.
Hell yeah. And we're glad that you found your passion and are doing what you've been put here to do, Christian.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Everybody, Christian Müenzner from Eternity's End, the new album, Embers of War, comes out this Friday, November 26th via Prosthetic Records. Mazza put that link in there for you to go pre-order that album. Make sure you do it. It's going to be a fun fucking time. I promise you. Christian, thank you so much for joining us today on Pulse of the Maggots, my friend. This is a lovely chat. We'll have to have you back whenever the occasion calls for it.
Oh, I'd love to anytime, and thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Congrats on the album, and get some sleep. I'm pretty sure it's late where you're at, and have a good rest of the week, my friend.
A little bit, yeah. Okay, thank you so much.